Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as VRTrader.com. Welcome back to the show, Mark.
Pleasure to be back, Jim. And as always, I'd like to remind our guests that I'm not a financial advisor, and this is not financial advice, just educational commentary.
Do we have a special offer for our listeners?
We do. We can still go to VRTrader.com, and we can still use the promo code from last year. We haven't changed it. It's 2021 half off, HALFOFF, and you insert that in the promo code slot on any of the order forms that pop up when you sign up. 2021 half off, you get 50% off.
Well, last week we talked about the first week of January can often predict what the markets are going to be like for the rest of the year. We're now roughly 2 weeks into the new year. What are the markets telling us so far?
Yes, a little bit to the negative. You got the first 5 days giving us a little bit of a sell signal there. And, nothing's carved in stone, but it's amazing how these adages, this dates back. First I read about it was the 1970s. And it was a creation of Yale Hirsch, old friend of mine. I think he's approaching 100 years old now. He's creator of the Stock Trader's Almanac, and he created this darn thing. And it's called the Early Warning System. And again, nothing's carved in stone, and but it's just one of the many tools that you use, and cyclical stuff. And then the other component to it is what January does as a whole as compared to the close on December 31st in the S&P. So if January is down net compared to the close December 31st, then you got a double sell signal, and that sort of confirms it. But again, it's still not 100%, but it certainly has shown some resiliency over the years. And we have other cyclical, goodies out there. For example, I often talk about Groundhog Day, which is coming up February 2nd. But some historical studies have shown that the market tends to be weak 2 weeks either side of Groundhog Day. As silly as that may sound, there seems to be something about the groundhog and the markets over the years, so there's a correlation there. It's probably around the 65-70% level. And then, we've got the vernal equinox coming up mid-March. Seems like a long way away, but something that we pay attention to because in many years, let's use 2020 as an example. You had a huge low right around the vernal equinox tied to the COVID disaster, and there are several other March lows over the decades you can cite that the market hits a low point again, within a week or two of the vernal equinox. And this year may be different, but that's something you keep on your calendar and you sort of watch because it could tie in very nicely with a trading opportunity. So those are sort of the cyclical things that we're looking at here, and a little bit of an extension of your question about the early 5-day warning.
Now, the current action on the markets today, negative for the most part, and even things like gold and crude were down. It does the prospect for gold look up if the markets go down?
I don't look at it that way. I never really viewed gold as an inverse indicator to the market. Many people do that with the bond market. They always assume one market does one thing, the market's going to do another. History says that during crash times or down times in the market, the baby gets thrown out with the bathwater and everything goes down. Margin calls force people to liquidate all positions, whether it's gold or gold stocks or whatever. So, my bias is that gold should probably rally because it's a bit oversold and we're still in the seasonal period that it could go up, but it has recovered a bit here in the last, 10, 12 days or so, a little bit. I'm keeping a little core long position there on a trading basis, thinking that it might pop a little bit further, but I'm not necessarily tying it to the market going down. As we saw today, it didn't react positively. So it's just more of a cyclical play, and the fact that we're still coming out of a big oversold reading in gold and silver. But I'm not going to make any heavy bets here, because if the market comes down, it could continue to be weak. So just a caveat there if you want to bet too heavily on gold here.
With the push towards electric vehicles, the demand for copper is bound to go up. After all, an electric car uses 183 pounds of copper on average, as opposed to 18 to 49 pounds for a regular car. Is there even enough copper in the world right now to meet the demand for vehicles in 5 to 10 years?
Well, if you look at Freeport-McMoran, which is a copper company based here in Phoenix, the stock hit a new high the last couple of days, as high as it's been in several years. Short still looks pretty good to me, though it's a little extended here. So the demand for copper apparently is out there and has been for a while, and I agree with you. It's part of the electric vehicle boom. And speaking of electric vehicles, Ford stock has been acting pretty good recently. Some people think it could be a competitor to Tesla, and that's, I think, made a new high in the last day or so. But that's sort of a tangential response there. But yeah, copper definitely has been in an uptrend, and I presume it will continue strong as the demand for the vehicles unfolds. The question is, will the demand really be there, or will we really able to produce all the electrical vehicles we need? And will we have the energy to electrify those vehicles if indeed they are mass-produced? And these are all unanswered questions. If everybody suddenly starts driving an electric vehicle tomorrow, there's just no power around to charge all those vehicles up. So it's going to take a lot of infrastructure, to including, what other sources of energy can be used to power up those vehicles, which is a big question which has to be resolved in the next couple of decades. So that's really a tangential question to the copper story, but we'll see how it all plays out. It may take a lot longer than people think. Time will tell.
We'll have more with Mark Leibovit right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mark Leibovit. Mark, with the troubles between Russia, Ukraine, NATO, and then China, Taiwan / Taipei, what would happen to energy stocks if somebody decides to start shooting over these disputes?
Well, we're already seeing energy stocks do well. A couple of the stocks that I track that are on our newsletter, U.S.-based stocks. I mean, virtually, Apache Oil, the XOP, which is the index for the oil companies, within a couple ticks, virtually hit their big high in the last day or two. So, crude oil itself has been recovering nicely. So what do those markets say? Crude oil actually hit a new recovery high day before yesterday. I'm looking at the index now as we're talking. So I guess they're anticipating, some type of conflict, or there's some other event that we don't know about. Could also be just shortages because of the demand and the inability to deliver, with supply chain issues and so forth as well. And as you recall from previous interviews, I've been a pretty much staunch bull on crude oil. I mean, I see the sky the limit. I don't know how high is high, but I could imagine huge numbers in the next several years. $200-$300 a barrel or higher type numbers as possibilities. Just like you saw the panic in March of last year, 2020. It's not last year now; it's 2 years back, where it went minus $43 a barrel, which was inconceivable to anybody that could even happen, that you would go negative on a futures contract. So the inconceivable could happen to the upside, and I suspect that's coming. And for all number of reasons, not necessarily geopolitical. It could be a whole bunch of other stuff. It could be geocosmic. It could be like you say, just the supply-demand issues, trying to create these electric vehicles and producers not producing enough oil to meet demand to even create the electric vehicle components. So all kinds of neat stuff could unfold here. But, bottom line is the oil industry has sort of been shutting down a little bit, and they haven't really been aggressive in exploration and so forth, and fear that there's political consequences to them, or, those who are super left thinking that you never need crude oil again, or just fighting against those companies. So they've been holding back a little bit on exploration and development, and which is going to create shortages. So it should be really interesting. I think, any big break in crude oil is a buy if you can hold on to it. I think it's a lot more coming. There's a lot of irrational people acting in an irrational way right now.
Yeah, I was just thinking with so many international institutions saying they're no longer going to invest in oil and gas, I'm thinking, well, what else is going to drive up prices and get even more people to invest in it than high prices?
Right. It's going to be really a lot of fun, interesting. It's amazing how this all backfired on the green movement, who don't want us to have airplanes anymore, or cows, or, anything that generates any type of emission of any kind. And, electric vehicles, the creation of the electric vehicle itself creates emissions and uses up a lot of, raw materials. And to create those raw materials, a lot of mining has to occur, which doesn't necessarily meet the guidelines of the green movement. I mean, it's all sort of ludicrous. We don't live, perfectly clean in our conduct or an environment. There's always waste. I mean, there's human waste, there's animal waste, there's waste from vegetation. There's always something up there that could pollute the ground or the atmosphere. We could have a volcano explode. We've talked about this before, which is a big area that I've been focusing on. Get a super volcano to explode. It seems like an unlikely event. Well, anything is possible. We had Krakatoa about 150 years ago, which, changed the climate on the Earth a little bit. It was the biggest explosion in hundreds and hundreds of years. Something totally left field out that nobody would even think about. Certainly changes your life overnight. So, I mean, there's other things besides, just geopolitical actions and so forth out there. A lot of things are cooking out there, and I think, you got to be aware that we don't control our environment and the future the way we think we do.
Yes, and I'm wondering how in Canada politicians are really in love with carbon taxes, and I always ask them, well, how could carbon taxes affect things like volcanic eruptions? Pinot-Thibault in one day erased 10 years of carbon credits. What about solar activity, changes in the Earth's orbit? All major factors in climate change. I don't see how taxes are going to help that.
Right. The NASA just reported there's I think it's called the Stereo spacecraft is now monitoring 2 ultraviolet sunspots just behind the sun's eastern limb, and these are potentially significant sunspot groups. And NASA is monitoring this. I just got a report last night about it. You don't see this on the national news or anybody talk about that. I mean, it's some giant solar event struck us, like the Carrington event that we talked about numerous times on this program. The Earth shut down. I mean, virtually would wipe out technology across the planet. So, we're just humble little insects here running around doing our thing, thinking we control everything, and we certainly don't. And I put a lot of other reports into the newsletter, stuff like this, about things going on with the Earth's axis, and, look at the climate events that we've seen here. Certainly global warming had nothing to do with the super freeze temperatures you guys experienced in Vancouver just the last few days, or the giant floods that, destroyed bridges and roads all over your part of the world, which is very unusual. So there are things happening that we have no control of, and these could change demand for products, could change the stock market. I'm more concerned about things like agricultural impact. I read or heard that there was no eggs or milk on the shelves in Vancouver because of the cows that had been killed and the transportation issues. And I've been a bull, as you know, on agricultural stuff for months. I've been talking about possible shortages. How did I know something like that there would be shortages possibly in food and stuff, which you saw in your part of the world? These are cyclical things that are happening on the planet right now, and I think they're going to continue. So you got to, I'm thinking every day about, shoring up food supplies and water and just things as a backup or emergency stuff. Because, what if we get a dramatic series of weather changes or planetary changes in our part of the world, which is down here in Arizona, which is different than you guys, but, we could suffer in other ways. So, you got to be prepared for stuff. So, anyway, that's sort of what the plan is out there. Things are very uncertain. I think it's going to be very volatile this year, in all aspects, whether it's the political, the geocosmic, and I just think it's going to be a lot of fun if you're trading the markets.
Well, I'm just thinking, I don't see how carbon taxes are going to do anything to change the climate, but something that man can directly influence is we should be building up our seawalls and make them more storm resilient and also a little higher to stop the ocean from creeping back in. Right here in Vancouver, we saw the Stanley Park seawall, which took 80 years to build, smashed to smithereens by the latest storm, and it may take years to restore. Those are just very practical things we can do. And a lot of the seawall in Vancouver was built by one man who just decided after work he'd spend an hour or two piling rocks together and cementing them. And I think if communities just did that, what if we all took half an hour after work to just work on the local project that's going to protect us? It wouldn't cost the government much, and you'd feel good doing it.
Well, the carbon tax and all these things are just financial manipulations which have no relationship to anything else but the tax and the money it creates for traders and for government. I mean, it has nothing to do with whether you believe in global warming or not. I mean, it's just a monetary manipulation on, the part of those who, control things. And, it's really a joke. I mean, it's just about money. It's just following the dollar, so to speak. It has nothing to do with reality. And they claim it does, but it really doesn't. It's just a question of who makes more money trading these damn things than anything else. It's a joke, but people seem to tolerate it and let the powers that be continue in this inane, movement. It's just like with the vaccines and with all the issues going on. I mean, today the Supreme Court said you can't force people to vaccinate, under certain guidelines unless it's, super emergency. I forgot the exact quotation. I mean, government has just gone out of control, and whether it's a carbon tax or trying to dictate to people about how they should conduct themselves, it's going to create a, big reaction. We've already seen some of it. So we're not even talking about civil unrest out there. Now, we're talking about geopolitical stuff between countries and wars, but citizenry is uprising on a level now, which is going to affect things as well. So it's going to be a fun year.
Mm-hmm. Now, the friend of the show, Ray Merriman, who follows geocosmic cycles and the influence of the sun, the moon, and the planets on activity here on Earth, he says the push is going to be towards more moderate politicians in the next few years because we're probably getting pretty fed up with people who are extreme on either side and ruled by ideology rather than in practical terms. Any thoughts on that?
We're seeing that already, and down here in the U.S., the fear is that the Democrats are losing the control that they wanted. They just lost the ability to institute a filibuster in the U.S. Senate, as actually one of the senators from Arizona objected to it, of all places, and there could be a big turnaround in the November elections, midterm elections down here, and it's going to probably shift more to the conservative side. People are fed up. I mean, people are quitting their jobs because they don't want to be vaccinated. I mean, why would someone do that unless they really believe the government was out of control or they're trying to protect themselves? So, it's a fight for freedom and independence. I think we're sort of a civil war underway on a low-key basis. I don't want to see it turn violent, but, that could be, ultimate consequence. I think some of the bigger war cycles and other things are saying there's going to be more civil unrest and more of this potential violence ahead, which is unfortunate, but that seems to be in the cyclical forecast, and part of it is because of the government suppression that's been underway.
Well, now the dog has spoken. I guess that's the end of the show.
Yeah, that was Little. I have two here. One's Doug and one's Little. Little is a little more noisy than Doug, so he identified possibly one of those civil unrest people outside my front door.
Mark, thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
My guest has been Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as vrtrader.com. If you have any questions for Mark or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HouseStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HouseStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HouseStreet.com radio is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.